What's up, everybody? It's so good to be back on my daily routine. Man, coming back has been kind of tough though, y'all. Man, releasing new content, and it's just funny how people like to get in their feelings when all you doing is asking questions. Bro, why you think your ideology and your belief is above being questioned and scrutinized? I'm not challenging you, I'm challenging the claim. Come on, man. It is not that serious for you to call me out my name and racist remarks. And man, y'all go check out the Facebook, the Jewish Skeptic on Facebook or whatnot. That'll be a way you can see some of the vulgar stuff or whatnot. I mean, it's quite funny to me, to be honest with you. Also, make sure y'all check me out on TikTok, of course, Jewish Skeptic. And then I'm also on Instagram too, up on the Jewish Skeptic. So same title across all platforms or whatnot. So with that being said, I am not apologizing for nothing that I'm doing. We talk about this all the time, and the fact that people just want to be so sensitive about their indoctrinations and their doctrines. Bro, the only reason it survived this long is because nobody ain't questioning it the way it's being questioned. And then 9 times out of 10, you probably ignored the questions anyway because you just wanted to be comfortable. But anyway, not going to get into that. Like I said, it's your boy, CJ Everson, and welcome back to the Jewish Skeptic. Today's episode: if life is eternal, then life is cheap. And I already know that title is going to make some people uncomfortable because most of us were taught the complete opposite. We were taught that eternal life gives life value. We were taught that heaven makes life meaningful. We were taught that without an afterlife, life becomes empty, pointless, cold, and depressing. But I want to challenge that idea today. I want to flip that argument upside down. Because from where I stand, the belief in eternal life does not automatically make life more valuable. In many cases, it can make this life cheaper. It can make this life feel temporary, disposable, secondary, and less urgent, in my opinion. Because if you truly believe this life is just a short test before forever, then this life is not the main event. It is the waiting room. It is the hallway. It is the audition. It is the lobby before the real show starts. And if that is the framework, then we need to be honest about what that does to the way people think about suffering, justice, death, and even meaning. The religious argument usually goes like this: if there is no heaven, then life has no ultimate meaning. If there is no afterlife, then death wins. If there is no eternity, then love, morality, and purpose are just temporary chemical reactions, I guess. And I get why that sounds powerful to people. I understand the emotional pull of it. Nobody wants to believe that their loved ones are gone forever. No one wants to believe that children die and there's no cosmic repair system for it. No one wants to believe injustice can happen and the universe does not automatically balance the books. Eternal life is comforting. I understand that, but comfort is not the same thing as truth. And comfort is not always morally harmless. Sometimes comfort can become an excuse. Sometimes comfort can be a sedative. Sometimes comfort can become a way to avoid the hard truth that life matters precisely because we don't know that we get another one. My position is simple on this. Life is valuable because it is finite. Life matters because it can be lost. Life matters because it runs out. Life matters because people die. Justice matters because victims do not have a verified second life where everything gets fixed. This world matters because this is the only world we can confirm. This body matters because this is the only body we can verify. This moment matters because once it is gone, it is gone. That does not make life meaningless, though. That makes life more urgent, in my opinion. That does not make life cheap. That makes life precious. Religion often says atheism cheaps life, but I think that's actually backwards. Atheism does not cheapen life. Atheism removes the refund policy. Atheism says that life is non-refundable. There is no confirmed return window. There is no verified cosmic customer service desk. There is no evidence-based guarantee that after we die, we wake up somewhere else and everything just makes sense. So the life in front of us becomes more important, not less, people. The people around us become more important, not less. The pain people experience becomes more important, not less. Because we cannot push everything into the afterlife and say, well, God will fix it later. That phrase sounds comforting, but it can be dangerous. I hear that so much. God will fix it later. Think about what that can do. A person is suffering right now. God will fix it later. A child is being abused right now. God will fix it later. A slave is beaten. God will fix it later. A poor person is exploited. Gotta fix it later. A woman is oppressed, but gotta fix it later. A whole population is told to endure misery now, but gotta fix it later. That is not justice. That is a theological delay. That is postponing moral responsibility into a supernatural courtroom no one can independently verify. And I know someone is going to say, well, believing in heaven does not mean I do not care about this life, CJ. Fair enough. I'm not saying every believer devalues life. And I'm not saying every religious person ignores suffering. Many believers do care deeply. Many religious people feed the poor, they help the sick, they fight injustice and love people sincerely. I'm not denying that. But I am challenging the logic of the doctrine itself. Because if this life is just a temporary test before eternity, then this life is automatically downgraded. It may still matter, but it matters as a means to something else. It matters as a test. It matters as a doorway. It matters as a preparation. It does not matter as the final, fragile, unrepeated thing that it is. That is the difference. In an eternal life worldview, earth becomes a rental. Heaven is the real home. This body becomes temporary housing. The soul is the real you. Suffering becomes a lesson. Tragedy becomes part of a plan. And injustice becomes something God will just handle later. And once you frame life that way, you have already softened the seriousness of what happens here. But from a secular point of view, there is no verified backup life. There is no confirmed second round. There is no demonstrated afterlife where the murdered get restored and the abused get repaired and the sick get healed and the stolen years get replaced. And I'm not saying that it's impossible. I'm saying nobody has demonstrated it though. Nobody has independently verified it though. No one has brought back a map, a camera, and a court transcript or a scientific confirmation from heaven. What people bring back are testimonies and traditions and scriptures and feelings and visions and claims. Those may be meaningful to believers, but they are not independent verification. And that matters because when you build your moral system on on an unverified life or afterlife, you risk minimizing the only life we actually know exists. You risk saying, don't worry, we're going to a better place. But how do you know that? You risk saying everything happens for a reason, but what reason makes a child's death morally acceptable? You risk saying God needed another angel, but why would an all-powerful being need to take someone's child? You risk saying this world is not our home, but this world is not our home. Then no wonder people keep treating it like a hotel room they can trash before they check out. That is one of the biggest problems I have with eternal life theology. It can make people spiritually comfortable with real world damage. It can train people to look at pain and see a divine mystery instead of a human emergency. It can train people to look at injustice and say God has a plan instead of asking who caused this, who benefited from this, and how do we stop it? It can train people to look at death and say they're not really gone, instead of honestly sitting back with brutal reality that someone's conscious voice, presence, laughter, memory, and future have disappeared from this world. I get it. The honesty hurts. It hurts badly. Grief without heaven is heavy. It's real heavy. Grief without reunion is heavy. Grief without cosmic explanation is heavy. And I'm not going to lie about that. Atheism does not offer the same emotional cushion that religion offers. It does not promise that every wound will be healed. It does not promise that every tear will be wiped away. It does not promise that your mother, your father, your child, your spouse, or your friend is waiting for you on the other side. And that is painful. But pain does not make something false, and comfort does not make something true. Sometimes the most respectable thing we can do for life is stop pretending death is not really death, because when we soften death too much, we soften life too, in my opinion. When we say death is just a doorway, we are not just making death easier. We are also making life easier, less final. And when life is less final, life becomes easier to gamble with. It's easier to waste, easier to postpone, easier to sacrifice. Think about martyrdom theology. Think about holy war. Think about cult wars who convince people to to die because paradise is waiting. Think about people who refuse medical treatment because they believe God will heal them and because heaven is better anyway. Think about people who endure abuse because they were told their reward is in heaven. Think about enslaved people being told to obey their slave masters because God will reward them later. Bro, the afterlife has often been used as a spiritual painkiller for oppressed people while the powerful keep power right here on earth. And that is why this conversation matters, because the question is not just, does eternal life make people feel better? Of course it does. The question is, what does eternal life teach people to tolerate? What does it teach people to postpone? What does it teach people to excuse? What does it teach people to minimize? What does it teach people to call temporary? If you believe your life is a vapor compared to eternity, then your suffering can be treated like a vapor too. If you believe this world is fallen and temporary, then fixing it becomes less urgent. If you believe paradise is coming later, then justice can wait. If you believe the real reward is after death, then people can be exploited in life and told to keep smiling because heaven is around the corner. That is not moral depth. That is not spiritual maturity, people. That is not profound wisdom. That is a doctrine that can be used to make people endure the unacceptable. And let me be clear. I am not saying religious people can't value life. Obviously they can. I'm not saying atheists automatically value life better. I'm not saying that. Obviously some don't. And I'm not making a cartoon argument. I am not saying every believer is reckless and every atheist is compassionate. Human beings are more complicated than that. But what I am saying is that finite life gives a stronger reason to take this life seriously without outsourcing meaning to another world. When you remove eternity, you remove the excuse that everything can be corrected later. When you remove heaven, you remove the idea that suffering can be balanced off stage. When you remove divine compensation, you are forced to face the moral weight of now. And now is heavy. Now is where people bleed. Now is where people starve. Now is where people are lonely. Now is where children need protection. Now is where racism happens. Now is where poverty happens. Now is where people lose time they'll never get back. Now is where love has to be shown. Now is where apologies have to be made. Now is where justice can be pursued. Not in the clouds, not after a death, not in some invisible kingdom. Now, that is why I say life is not cheap without eternity. Life is expensive because it costs time. Life costs attention. It costs energy. It costs vulnerability. It costs grief. Every relationship you have is temporary, and every person you love is mortal. Every conversation is limited. Every hug is numbered. Every morning is one less morning. That is clarity. People hear atheists talk like this and they think it is depressing. But I think it's the opposite. I think it is liberating, because when you stop waiting for another world, you start paying attention to this one. Food tastes different. Time feels different. Love feels different. Nature feels different. The people around you feel less replaceable. You stop treating it like it's a dress rehearsal for heaven. You stop treating your body like a dirty container for a soul. You stop treating the earth like a fallen place you are trying to escape. You start realizing that this is the miracle. Not miracle in the supernatural sense, miracle in a human sense. Rare, fragile, unrepeatable, unowned by gods, not guaranteed, not promised, not permanent. And I know someone will say, but there is no eternal life, then what is the point? The point is not given from the sky. The point is built into life. The point is your child laughing. The point is your spouse needing you. The point is your friend calling you at midnight because they are broke down with a flat tire. The point is music. The point is memory. The point is building something. The point is learning something. The point is reducing suffering while we are here. The point is not found by escaping this world. The point is found by being honest around the world. And honesty, I think the religious argument rewards something backwards. When people say life only matters, because it lasts forever, I hear a person saying temporary because things are not valuable, but that is obviously false. A sunset is temporary and people stop to watch it. A song is temporary and people cry when they hear it. A child or a childhood is temporary and parents treasure it. A flower is temporary and people still bring flowers to funerals. A vacation is temporary and people still save money for it. A kiss is temporary and it can change your whole day. Temporary does not mean meaningless. Temporary often means more meaningful because it cannot be possessed forever. So why do we treat human life differently? Why do we act like life needs eternity to matter? That is not a logic. That is fear talking. That is the fear of death trying to negotiate with reality. And I understand that matters. I have felt that fear. But fear should not allow to write our philosophy. If anything, eternity can cheapen out on the experience because infinite time makes every moment less rare. If you have forever, what is one day? If you have forever, what is 80 years? If you have forever, what is one lifetime? If you have forever, then this becomes almost nothing by comparison. Religion will call life precious, but then turn around and say it's nothing compared to eternity. That's a contradiction. Y'all don't see it? You can't tell me this life is infinitely important and then tell me it is a blink, a test, a vapor, or a temporary stop because there's a real destination I gotta go to. You need to pick one. Because if eternity is real, then life is mathematically tiny. It is not even a drop in the ocean. It is less than that. Compared to forever, one human life is basically zero. And that is supposed to make life more meaningful? No. It makes life smaller. It shrinks. It turns our pain, our love, our history, and our struggle into preface. But if this is only life, then 80 years is not tiny. 80 years is everything. 40 years is everything. 10 years is everything. One day can be everything. One phone call can be everything. One act of kindness can be everything. But because there is no infinite timeline swallowing it whole, there is no eternity making it look small. There is only this limited window of awareness that makes every second morally loud. This is also why I reject the idea that morality needs external life. Well, eternal life, not external. People say without heaven and hell, why be good? And that question tells me more about them than it tells me about atheism. Because if the only reason you don't hurt people is because you think there's a reward or punishment after death, then your morality is not love. It is transactional management. If the only reason you care about human life is because God is watching, then you don't value people. You value surveillance. If the only reason you need to do right is because heaven is a prize and hell is a threat, then that is not moral maturity. I don't need eternal life to know suffering matters. I don't need heaven to know children should be protected. I don't need hell to know cruelty is wrong. I don't need a soul doctrine to know people have feelings, memories, a consciousness, families, and pain. I don't need a God to tell me a human being matters. The evidence is standing right in front of me. They can hurt, they can love, they can fear, they can hope, they can lose, they can die. And to me, that is enough. And this is what a religious person might say, but atheism can't give ultimate meaning. And my response is, maybe not. But maybe ultimate meaning is not the wrong demand. Maybe demanding cosmic meaning before you value life is a problem. Maybe life does not need to be eternal to be meaningful. Maybe meaning does not have to be infinite to be real. Maybe love does not have to last forever to be real. Maybe injustice doesn't need heaven to be justice. Maybe purpose does not need to be written into the fabric of the universe to matter to conscious beings inside the universe. We keep confusing not eternal with not real, and that is the mistake. A temporary life is still a real life. A temporary love is still real love. Temporary joy is still real joy. Temporary pain is still real pain. Temporary consciousness is still consciousness. The fact that something ends does not mean it is fake. It means it was limited. And limitation is not emptiness. Limitation is not what gives life its space. A movie matters because of its end. A song matters because it resolves. A story matters because it has a final page. If a song went on forever, it wouldn't stop being beautiful and it'd start being noise. If a movie never ended, then it will become torture. If a book had no final page, then the story would collapse. Endings don't destroy meaning. Endings create meaning. The ending is what makes the middle matter. It thinks death defeats meaning, but death may be part of why meaning exists at all. We care because time is limited. We choose because we cannot choose everything. We love because we can lose. We grieve because someone irreplaceable was here and now they're not. Grief is not a proof of heaven. Grief is not proof that temporary life can have permanent impact on those who remain. Now let's talk about the phrase life is sacred. Your God created it, right? Religious people often say life is sacred because God created it. That's why I said it like I did. Your God created it, right? But I think life is sacred in a different way. Not because a deity owns it, not because a soul is trapped inside of it, not because it is a test for heaven. Life is sacred because it's vulnerable. Life is sacred because it can be destroyed. Life is sacred because consciousness is rare. Life is sacred because people are not replaceable. Life is sacred because once a person is gone, the exact arrangement of their memories, voice, and emotions, and personality and presence will never happen again, y'all. There's a stronger reason to protect life, not a weaker one. And I don't need to believe a person has a immortal soul to show or to know they should not be harmed. In fact, believing they have an immortal soul can sometimes make harm seem less final. You could say, well, they're with God now. And you can say they're in a better place. You can say this was God's will. But if you don't believe that, then a death is not a promotion. It's a loss, a real loss. I know it was me, a human loss, a permanent loss as far as we can verify. And it makes murder, abuse, neglect, and war even more serious. This is why I say eternal life can cheapen life. Because if nobody really dies, then death is not the same kind of tragedy. If everyone continues forever, then the worst thing that can happen here is temporary inconvenience before eternal resolution. That may sound comforting, but it lowers the moral temperature. It makes catastrophe easier to digest. It makes suffering easier to explain. It makes injustice easier to postpone. And I don't want easy explanations for suffering. I want honest ones. I don't want people to tell grieving parents, God needed your child. I want people to say, this is horrible and we are with you. I don't want people telling the oppressed, your reward is in heaven. I want people asking why oppression is even happening on earth. I don't want people telling victims everything happens for a reason. I want people brave enough to admit that sometimes horrible things happen because humans are cruel, systems are broken and bodies fail and nature does not care about our feelings. Truth is hard, but it is morally cleaner than protecting. There is a divine reason behind every wound. And that is what this episode is really about today. It is not just about heaven. It is about responsibility. If this life is all we can verify, then we cannot afford to be passive. We can't afford to waste decades waiting for a God to do what humans refuse to do. We cannot afford to excuse injustice because of a future judgment day. We cannot afford to treat the earth like it is disposable because we think a new heaven and a new earth are coming. We can't afford to tell people to endure misery because their crown is waiting for them after death. No, feed people now, protect children now, fight injustice now, love people now, make the apology now, tell the truth now, fix what you can now, because now is where life is happening. And I know that sounds intense, but it should sound intense. Life is intense. Morality is intense. Time is intensive. The fact that we are alive at all is intense. We are conscious organisms on a tiny planet orbiting a star in a universe that doesn't owe us comfort. We are temporary arrangements of matter that somehow became aware of themselves. We can think, we can love, we can remember, we can ask questions, we can bury our dead, we can write songs, we can build telescopes, we can argue about gods, we can hold babies, we can fear death, we can create meaning in a universe that may not have created meaning for us. That is not cheap. That is astonishing. And honestly, I do not need eternity to make that beautiful. Eternity might actually make it less beautiful because part of the beauty is that it does not last. Part of the value is that I can slip away. Part of the urgency is that every moment is moving think about your loved ones. If you knew you had infinite time with them, think about it. Would this conversation matter the same way? Maybe it would matter. Maybe it would not matter. Maybe it may, I don't know. Would it carry the same weight? The reason your mother's voice matters is because one day you may not hear it. The reason your child's childhood matters is because it'll end. The reason your marriage matters is because time is not guaranteed. The reason friendship matters is because nobody gets forever. That is not darkness. That is the truth that makes love serious. So when people say without eternal life, life is meaningless, I hear someone insulting the only life they actually know they actually have. I hear someone saying this world is not enough. I hear someone saying human love is not enough unless it lasts forever. I hear someone saying mortality is not enough unless the universe rewards it. I hear someone saying temporary existence is too small to matter. And I reject that. I draw the line. This life is not small to the people living in it. A child's life is not small because it is temporary. A mother's love is not small because she dies. Friendship is not small because it ends. A moment of kindness is not small because the universe does not remember it forever. We remember. The people affected remember. And even when memory fades, the impact is still real. Not everything has to be eternal to matter. That is the line. That is the point. That is the thesis. And this is where I want to challenge believers directly, because respectfully, ask yourself this. Do you value this life for what it is, or do you value it because of what you think comes after it? Do you love people as fragile mortal beings, or do you treat them as souls passing through? Do you fight suffering because suffering is unacceptable now? Or do you comfort yourself with the idea that God will balance it later? Do you protect the earth because it is our only home? Or do you secretly believe this world is temporary and expandable? Do you seek justice because victims deserve justice now? Or because you think divine judgment will eventually handle the books? You know, the book of life. Those questions matter because theology is not just abstract belief. Theology shapes behavior. What you believe about eternity affects what you tolerate in time. What you believe in heaven affects what you ignore on earth. What you believe about death affects how seriously you take life. And for us atheists and skeptics and doubters, and for y'all that might be watching this, I want to say this to you. We don't have to accept the accusation that our worldview is empty. We do not have to act embarrassed because we do not believe in heaven. We do not have to let religious people frame us as hopeless. There is a deep, serious, beautiful, human-centered meaning in accepting mortality. There is courage in saying, I don't know that I get forever, so I am going to care harder now. There is honesty in saying, I don't know that justice comes after death, so I'm going to fight for it while people are alive. There is love in saying, I do not believe your soul floats away, so your actual life matters to me right now. That is responsibility, not nihilism. Nihilism is not refusing to believe in heaven. Nihilism looking at this world and treating it like it doesn't matter because another world is supposedly coming. Nihilism is telling suffering people to wait for paradise instead of demanding justice. Nihilism is calling this life a test while people are bleeding in real time. Nihilism is making earth cheap in the name of eternity. So let's stop pretending atheism is the worldview that cheapens life. Atheism says life is rare. Religion only says life is temporary. Atheism says this life is all that we can verify. Religion often says this life is a shadow of the real one. Atheism says death is serious. Religion says death is just a transition. Atheism says justice must be pursued here. Religion often says, well, God will handle it later. So, who is really cheapening life? Again, I'm not saying every believer does this. I am saying the doctrine that has danger built into it. And if we are going to be honest, we have to examine that danger. Because if heaven is forever, the earth can be a rental. If eternity is surprise, then life becomes the audition. If death is not really death, then loss becomes easier to explain away. If suffering is temporary, then injustice becomes easier to tolerate. If God fixes everything later, then humans can avoid fixing what is broken now. But if this life is finite, then life ain't cheap. It's priceless. A finite life means your time matters. A finite life means your choices matter. A finite life means your relationships matter. A finite life means wasting someone's years is a serious harm. A finite life means stealing someone's freedom is not just a temporary inconvenience. It is stealing the only life they know they have. A finite life means oppression is not something we can balance with heaven. It is a crime against someone's limited existence. A finite life means grief is not just a doorway to reunion. It is an ache of real absence. This is why I say mortality gives life weight. Mortality is not the enemy of meaning. Mortality is the pressure that makes meaning real. And maybe that is what people are afraid of. Maybe eternal life is not really about meaning. Maybe it's about avoiding the terror of finality. Maybe people don't want eternal life because it makes life meaningful. Maybe people want eternal life because they can't bear the thought that it is all we get. And again, I can understand that. I'm not mocking that. Death is terrifying. Loss is terrifying. The end of consciousness is terrifying, but we have to be careful not to confuse emotional need with evidence. Wanting eternity does not prove eternity. Needing comfort does not prove heaven. Being afraid of death does not prove death is not final. And if eternal life is not proven, then we should not build our ethics around it. We should build our ethics around what we can verify. Conscious beings can suffer. People can be harmed. Time can be stolen. Bodies can be destroyed. Relationships can be broken. And lives can end at any minute. That is enough for mortality. That is enough for urgency. That is enough for meaning. So no, I do not believe life is cheap because it ends. I believe life is precious because it ends. And I do not believe love is meaningless because it is temporary. I believe love is urgent because it is temporary. I don't believe justice is pointless without heaven. I believe justice is more necessary because heaven has not been demonstrated. I don't believe death is harmless because someone says the soul lives on. I believe death is serious because no one has proven that a soul lives on. This is the part religious people often misunderstand. Skepticism is not coldness. Skepticism is discipline. It is refusing to make claims beyond the evidence. It is refusing to tell grieving people things we cannot prove. It is refusing to cheapen suffering with slogans. It is refusing to use heaven as a cover for unanswered questions. It is refusing to turn human pain into theological poetry just because reality is uncomfortable. Sometimes the most compassionate answer is not they're in a better place. Sometimes the most compassionate answer is I am here. Sometimes the most moral answer is not God has a plan. Sometimes the most moral answer is this should have not happened. Sometimes the most honest answer is not you will understand one day. Sometimes the most honest answer is I don't know why this happened, but I will not insult your pain by pretending I do. That is a heavier answer, but it is cleaner. It respects the person in front of you. It does not use eternity to step on their wound. And that is my closing thought. If life is eternal, then this life can become cheap. But if life is finite, then this life becomes priceless. Because this is not a rehearsal. This is not a waiting room. This is not a test drive. And this dang show is not a temporary inconvenience before paradise. This is confirmed life, people. This is where your children need you. This is where your family loves you. This is where your body feels pain. This is where your mind forms memories. This is where justice is needed. This is where truth matters. This is where compassion has to show up. Don't let anyone tell you finite means meaningless. Finite means urgent. Finite means fragile. Finite means handle with care. A flower does not need to bloom forever to be beautiful. A song does not need to play forever to move you. A sunset does not need to last forever to stop you in your tracks. And a human life does not need eternity to matter. It matters because it happened. It mattered because someone lived it. It matters because someone loved. They suffered or dreamed or feared or learned or changed or died inside it. It matters because there will never be another exact version of that person again. So when they say eternal life gives life value, I say maybe. But maybe eternity is the thing that makes this life feel small. Maybe forever makes now look cheap. And maybe the real courage is not believing we live forever. Maybe the real courage is admitting we probably do not, and still choosing to love, fight, build, laugh, forgive, protect, and tell the truth anyway. Because life doesn't need to be eternal to be valuable. It needs to be real. And this life is real. And that's enough for me. Drop your comments. I'm your boy CJ Everson. And I'm the Jewish Skeptic. I'll see y'all on the next one. Take care.
Do you know what I found? The more you know, the less you know.